My Ferrari F8 Tributo, a screaming testament to Italian engineering and years of meticulous elbow grease, was more than just a car. It was a symbol. A symbol of my own hard work, the tangible reward for countless hours spent coaxing showroom shine from the grimiest of vehicles owned by Scottsdale's elite. It represented a defiance, perhaps, against the mundane conformity that permeated my meticulously manicured neighborhood. Stucco fortresses, each bearing an identical beige mailbox like a badge of blandness, lined the perfectly paved streets. The air hummed with the quiet drone of sprinkler systems and the distant rattle of leaf blowers, a symphony of suburban serenity, or perhaps suffocating stagnation. My Rosso Corsa Ferrari, parked proudly in my driveway, was a vibrant, unapologetic rebellion against this beige brigade. The initial days with the F8 were pure bliss. The throaty roar of the engine, the feeling of the responsive steering wheel, in my hands, the envious glances of passers-by. It was everything I had dreamed of. I'd even catch glimpses of smiles from some of the younger kids in the neighborhood, their eyes wide with unadulterated awe. But that bubble of automotive euphoria was soon to be pierced by the sharp barb of suburban discontent. It started subtly, with lingering stares and hushed whispers. Then came the inevitable confrontation with Karen. Karen, the self-appointed guardian of our neighborhood's aesthetic sensibilities, was a force of nature, albeit a deeply irritating one. Her presence was heralded by the incessant yapping of her diminutive yet aggressively territorial Chihuahua mix, aptly named Killer. The irony was truly lost on her. She patrolled the streets with her trusty clipboard, a weapon of bureaucratic oppression, and a Bluetooth headset permanently affixed to her ear, even though I'd never actually seen her engaged in a conversation. I suspected it was simply a prop, a symbol of her self-perceived importance. Her pronouncements, delivered with an air of unwavering conviction, often revolved around the sanctity of property values and the preservation of our family-friendly environment, which, apparently, was threatened by the mere existence of my bright red sports car. Her initial pronouncements regarding the Ferrari were predictably hostile, laced with thinly veiled accusations that my vehicle was attracting undesirables and disrupting the carefully cultivated harmony of our upper-middle-class enclave. I dismissed her concerns as the ramblings of a bored busybody, fully confident that the sheer absurdity of her complaints would eventually lead her to abandon her crusade. I was, unfortunately, mistaken. The escalation was gradual, yet persistent. The passive-aggressive notes plastered to my windshield escalated from mildly annoying to overtly insulting. They were carefully crafted to prick at my insecurities, to undermine my sense of belonging. "You don't look like someone who drives a Ferrari." That one stung, I have to admit. Was it my profession, my background, or perhaps simply the fact that I didn't fit her preconceived notion of what a Ferrari owner should be? The subtle jabs at my social status soon morphed into outright accusations of impropriety, suggesting that the car was somehow ill-gotten, or even worse, that I was somehow unworthy of it. The notes were a constant reminder of Karen's judgment, a daily dose of suburban poison. I tried to ignore them, to brush them off as the pathetic attempts of a delusional woman seeking control. But deep down, they chipped away at my confidence, leaving me feeling increasingly isolated and targeted. I started to dread opening my garage door, bracing myself for the next salvo in Karen's personal war against my Ferrari. The Saturday showdown began innocently enough. I had dedicated the day to detailing the F8, a ritual of sorts that allowed me to reconnect with the car on a deeper level. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and I was armed with an arsenal of microfiber towels, specialized cleaning products, and a high-powered air blower. I was in my element, meticulously attending to every curve and crevice of the car's exquisite bodywork. That's when Karen descended upon me, a whirlwind of righteous indignation and simmering rage. Gone was the clipboard, the Bluetooth headset, and the carefully constructed facade of polite disapproval. In their place was an unadulterated fury, a primal scream of suburban discontent. She marched up my driveway, her face contorted with anger, her eyes blazing with an unsettling intensity. "That car isn't yours," she declared, her voice trembling with conviction. The statement hung in the air, thick with disbelief. I paused, my microfiber towel suspended mid-air, and stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. Karen proceeded to unravel her utterly delusional narrative. She claimed that she had seen an identical Ferrari F8 Tributo listed for sale at an estate sale in Scottsdale 2 years prior. According to her, this was the same car, a resurrected automotive ghost that had somehow found its way into my possession. She insisted that the car rightfully belonged to her, a pronouncement that bordered on the absurd. She even went so far as to demand that I hand over the keys, suggesting that we can avoid legal drama if I just return it peacefully. I couldn't help but laugh. I assumed it was some kind of elaborate prank, a bizarre attempt to rattle me. But as I looked into her eyes, I realized that she was dead serious. Her grip tightened, and she lunged for the driver's side door, attempting to wrest it open. My laughter died in my throat. This was no longer a joke. I instinctively stepped between her and the car, shielding my precious Ferrari from her grasp. She shoved me. It wasn't a gentle nudge or a playful tap. It was a full-fledged shove, delivered with surprising force. I stumbled backward, momentarily caught off guard. The realization dawned on me that I was standing on my own property, being physically assaulted by a woman who believed my Ferrari was some kind of reincarnated luxury car from her past. I was furious, but also bewildered. The situation was so utterly bizarre that it was almost comical. Karen, fueled by her delusional conviction, continued to rant and rave, accusing me of theft and demanding that I relinquish the car. She seemed oblivious to the absurdity of her actions, lost in her own twisted reality. Finally, she screamed that she was calling the police. "Good," I retorted. "Call them. I'll be waiting." I couldn't wait for law enforcement to arrive and put an end to this ridiculous charade. The arrival of the police was almost anticlimactic. A temporary reprieve from the escalating insanity. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb, their flashing lights casting long, distorted shadows across my manicured lawn. Karen, seizing the opportunity to play the victim, rushed towards the officers, her voice cracking with feigned tears. She launched into a dramatic rendition of the events, claiming that I had assaulted her, stolen her car, and even threatened her beloved Chihuahua killer. I stood there, holding my detailing towel and a spray bottle of ceramic coating, feeling like a bewildered prop in a surreal suburban drama. The officers, seasoned veterans of countless domestic disputes and neighborhood squabbles, calmly separated us. One officer, a burly man with a reassuringly calm demeanor, approached me and began to ask questions. I recounted the events, trying to remain as composed and factual as possible, emphasizing Karen's delusional claims and her physical assault. I presented my driver's license, the car's registration, the title, and even the Ferrari's mobile app, which allowed me to remotely unlock and track the vehicle. I demonstrated the app's functionality, causing the car to ping loudly, confirming its location. The officer listened patiently, his expression inscrutable. He glanced at Karen, who was still gesticulating wildly and recounting her version of events with a theatrical flair. He seemed skeptical of her claims, but he maintained a professional neutrality. I could almost see the gears turning in his head as he weighed the conflicting narratives and assessed the credibility of each party. The officer seemed satisfied with my documentation, it seemed. He was about to turn to Karen when she decided to kick it up a notch. But then Karen made a fatal mistake. She dramatically announced that she had proof to support her claims, courtesy of her private investigator. She reached into a large handbag and retrieved a manila folder, presenting it to the officer with a triumphant flourish. I braced myself, wondering what ridiculous scheme she had concocted. The officer opened the folder and began to examine the contents. Inside were photographs of my car, on my driveway, taken from multiple angles, at night. My heart sank. This was worse than I had imagined. But that wasn't the worst of it. The photos in the folder were damning, but it was the other documents that sent a chill down my spine. Along with the nighttime images of my Ferrari, Karen's private investigator had provided printouts of my garage door code, my Wi-Fi network, name, and a disturbingly clear image of the inside of my garage taken through a window. The realization washed over me like ice water. I had been under surveillance. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was a calculated invasion of my privacy, a deliberate attempt to gather information and intimidate me. The officer's demeanor shifted dramatically. His initial skepticism evaporated, replaced by a look of grim concern. He immediately called for backup, his voice tight with urgency. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived, their sirens cutting through the suburban calm. The situation had escalated from a minor neighborhood squabble to a serious criminal investigation. The officers questioned Karen about the origins of the documents, specifically asking if she had paid someone to obtain my garage code and enter my property without my consent. Karen, blinded by her delusional conviction, proudly admitted that she had commissioned an investigation to prove that the car belonged to her. She seemed to believe that her actions were justified, that she was acting within her rights as a concerned citizen. Her arrogance and lack of self-awareness were astonishing. She didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation, the fact that she had potentially committed several serious crimes. The officers exchanged glances, their faces grim. They placed Karen under arrest for conspiracy to commit trespassing, attempted grand theft auto, harassment, and unauthorized surveillance. As they led her to one of the patrol cars, her Chihuahua killer began to bark hysterically, adding a final pathetic note to the already surreal scene. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more bizarre, one of the responding officers recognized the name of the private investigator Karen had hired. It turned out that the individual was already wanted by the police for multiple counts of breaking and entering, had pending felony charges, and was being actively investigated for impersonating a federal agent. The realization dawned on the police that Karen's actions were not isolated, that she might be involved in something far more sinister. The officers decided to obtain a warrant to search her house, hoping to uncover more evidence. I watched in disbelief as they escorted Karen to a patrol car, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. The quiet, manicured street was now a scene of flashing lights, uniformed officers, and bewildered neighbors peering from their windows. My Ferrari, the initial source of the conflict, now stood as a silent witness to Karen's downfall. The search of the aftermath of Karen's arrest was a mixture of relief, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. The neighborhood, freed from her oppressive reign, began to breathe again. The absence of the HOA was a revelation. No more arbitrary rules, no more passive-aggressive notes, no more fear of incurring Karen's wrath. The residents began to reconnect with each other, forging new bonds of trust and cooperation. The focus shifted from enforcing conformity to celebrating individuality. My Ferrari, once a symbol of discord, became a symbol of resilience. The neighbors, initially apprehensive about its presence, now expressed their admiration for its beauty and power. The kids in the neighborhood would gather around it, their eyes wide with wonder, and I would happily answer their questions about its engine, its speed, and its history. The car became a conversation starter, a bridge between generations, a reminder that beauty and passion can thrive even in the most mundane of environments. As for Karen, she disappeared from our lives, swallowed up by the legal system. I heard through the grapevine that she had been diagnosed with a severe form of delusional disorder and had been committed to a psychiatric facility. I didn't feel any satisfaction in her misfortune. I simply felt a sense of closure, a sense that justice had been served. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also been transformative. It had taught me the importance of standing up for what I believe in, of defending my property and my privacy, and of never allowing anyone to dictate how I should live my life. The quiet drone of sprinkler systems and the distant rattle of leaf blowers still filled the air, but now they were accompanied by a new sound, the throaty roar of my Ferrari F8 Tributo, a symphony of freedom and defiance. I would often take the car for a spin, driving along the winding roads that snaked through the desert landscape, feeling the wind in my hair and the sun on my face. The car was more than just a possession. It was an extension of myself, a symbol of my passion, my hard work, and my unwavering commitment to living life on my own terms. And with the dissolution of the HOA, I even painted my beige mailbox Rosso Corsa to match my F8. The power was mine. No more Karen, no more HOA, just peace, the open road, and 710 horsepower parked proudly in my driveway. And sometimes, on a warm desert evening, I would open the garage door, turn on the engine, and let the sound of the Ferrari fill the neighborhood. A subtle reminder that even in the most conformist of environments, individuality can always find a way to thrive. The best revenge, after all, is living well. Karen's house was a Pandora's box of suburban paranoia. The officers emerged, carrying boxes filled with meticulously organized folders. Inside were photographs of multiple neighbors' homes, complete with license plate numbers, detailed schedules, and even copies of their keys. Karen wasn't just an HOA nuisance. She was running some kind of twisted suburban surveillance ring, convinced that she had the authority to enforce her own distorted version of neighborhood order. The full extent of her activities began to unravel. She had been meticulously tracking the movements of her neighbors, recording their comings and goings, and compiling extensive dossiers on their personal lives. She had been using the information to enforce her own arbitrary rules, issuing violation notices for minor infractions, and harassing those who didn't conform to her rigid standards. She had even been accused of tampering with neighbors' property, moving their garbage cans, adjusting their sprinkler timers, and even, in one particularly bizarre incident, replacing a neighbor's garden gnome with a miniature plastic flamingo. The neighbors were horrified. The quiet, peaceful community had been infiltrated by a delusional control freak who had been secretly monitoring their every move. The sense of trust and security that had once defined the neighborhood was shattered, replaced by suspicion and unease. The news spread like wildfire through the community, sparking a wave of outrage and disbelief. The HOA board, realizing the depth of Karen's deception, called an emergency meeting. Not only was she immediately removed from her position as president, but the board voted to disband the HOA altogether. The realization dawned that she had faked years' worth of violation reports and had been using her position to exert undue influence and control over the community. Karen was charged with a litany of offenses, including attempted grand theft auto, stalking, criminal conspiracy, harassment, trespassing, obstruction, and possession of unlawful surveillance materials. As she was being processed, she continued to insist that she was acting in the best interests of the neighborhood, that she was simply trying to maintain order and protect property values. Her delusional conviction was unwavering, even in the face of overwhelming evidence against her. The story of Karen and her surveillance ring became a local sensation, a cautionary tale of suburban paranoia and the dangers of unchecked power. The quiet, unassuming neighborhood was thrust into the spotlight, becoming a symbol of the dark underbelly of suburban life.